Hello, everyone, and welcome to Aurigo's webinar series. My name is Kelsey Pierce, and I am an events marketing specialist here at Aurigo. I want to thank you all for joining us for our last webinar of the year. We're excited to dive into a powerful discussion on leading and developing a successful capital program team. Before we get started, I wanted to go over a few housekeeping rules. Today's webinar will be recorded, and all registered participants will receive a copy of the recording and slides after the session. If you have any questions during the webinar, please submit them in the Q&A chat box, and we'll answer them at the end of today's session. Now, I am happy to introduce our panel today. Firstly, we have our moderator, who is our VP of Industry Strategy, Mike Tooley.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Next, we have Kevin Christensen. He is the former Chief Operating Officer of the Montana Department of Transportation, and with over a 30-year career, he advanced from the field engineer to executive management. His expertise includes team building, personal management, problem solving, dispute resolution, and budgeting. Kevin holds a degree in construction engineering from Montana State University and maintains his professional engineering license in Montana. He is currently enjoying his retirement with his wife, traveling and spending time outdoors. Kevin, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Next, we have Scott Richrath, former CFO of the Colorado Department of Transportation with nearly 25 years of civil infrastructure experience. His expertise includes program and performance management, technology, innovative finance, team building, and asset management. Scott currently leads the Cities and Places business line with Atkins Realis Infrastructure Solutions Unit, supporting major municipality programs across transportation, water, transit rail, and aviation. During his time at Colorado DOT, he led significant initiatives for the agency, including the launch of a program management office and development of risk-based assessment management plans and performance measures. Scott, we're so happy to have you.
Thanks, Kelsey, and thanks to everyone for joining the call today.
And finally, we have Elizabeth Elliott, Director of Lincoln Transportation and Utilities, the largest department in the city of Lincoln. She leads the advancement of the city's transportation, transit, water, wastewater, and stormwater systems, using data-driven strategies to sustain and strengthen Lincoln's infrastructure. Elizabeth, thank you.
Thanks, Kelsey. Looking forward to the conversation.
Perfect. And right before I hand it over to Mike, I did want to introduce just a poll question. This first one is just going to ask you what organization you represent. That way, whenever we're asking our panelists, we can kind of tailor our answers just to give a little bit of a better understanding of where you might be, whether it be state DOT, city and county, utilities, consulting firms, contractor builder, or other. So we'll just give those a few moments. There. All right. Let's see what we've got. Okay, so it looks like a lot are coming from city and government, or we've got other and utilities. State DOTs, a nice kind of stretch. Perfect. And then one last poll question. These are covering our topics for today. So what is your biggest leadership challenge in capital programs today? Is it cross-functional collaboration across the project lifecycle, professional development and career pathways, technology and data utilization, or organizational structure and operational efficiency? These are going to be the topics that we're covering today, so that way we can kind of spend a little bit more time if there's an overwhelming need for one category rather than the others. And I'll just give that one a few moments. Alrighty. Okay, so it looks like cross-functional collaboration across the project lifecycle and organizational structure and operational efficiency. So those are two topics we're really excited to get into today. So And with that, I will hand it over to Mike.
Thanks, Kelsey, and I appreciate the introduction and the poll questions. It kind of helps us understand what the concerns of our audience is. And by the way, audience, thank you for attending this webinar today. I think you're going to enjoy the conversation. We have 4 very powerful individuals here, very experienced, that can go through these 4 pillars of information we want to present to you. You saw that in the previous poll question, and the 4 things we hope to cover today very thoroughly is leading cross-functional teams across the capital program lifecycle, talk about career pathways, leveraging technology and data to drive that performance, and then finally, building the right organizational structure for long-term impact. And we'll go through these topics in that order. And very excited to ask our panelists questions that will draw some of that experience and knowledge from them to share with you today. So with that, we'll get right into it. I'll ask my first question about leading cross-functional teams across the capital program lifecycle, and I'll ask my good friend Kevin from the formerly of the Montana Department of Transportation. Kevin, how do you align priorities between planning, engineering, and finance teams that sometimes operate in silos?
Well, thanks, Mike. I think first of all, we can all agree that operating in silos in these kinds of organizations is somewhat counterproductive. And, you know, it's something that I dealt with quite a bit in my career. And so I think it's very important to break those silos down. And what I found, the best way to do that is to just develop a highly functioning team. And that takes quite a bit of work. And ultimately it takes a lot of communication, constant communication. But I think in the end, when you start to develop kind of that culture, and I'll probably talk about this a lot today, is more of a developing a culture within your organization that demands accountability and innovation. I think the more you communicate, the more you get the team develop a cohesive team. I think it lends itself to breaking those silos down. You know, obviously the priorities come from up high executive management, and in my case, ultimately the governor's office. And so it's important to be able to effectively communicate those priorities to the team. And as you develop the highly functioning team, hopefully everybody's kind of pulling that wagon in the same direction. So that's what I found in my career is really getting everybody pulling in the right direction. And it does take a lot of work, but ultimately I think the key is constant communication.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Kevin. Definitely that's the common description of leadership is getting a group to pull in the same direction, right? So Elizabeth, when it comes to communication, Kevin hit on that pretty clearly as that being a very important piece of leading cross-functional teams. But what steps help keep communication flowing between what could be very technical staff and in the policy side or public-facing teams that you manage in the city of Lincoln?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more to over communicate. There's times where I thought I was communicating, I was sending out emails to everyone and it didn't seem to be helping. So what I have found is really making sure communicating multiple ways. Maybe it's an email, but also pulling the people together to actually have conversations, whether it's via Zoom, Teams, those kinds of things, or in person, and really trying to translate what the technical staff are saying and translating that to our public information officers, our elected officials, and those. But really making sure that we're not assuming alignment, that you're explaining everything and clarifying roles. That's something that I frequently have run into of who is making the decisions in the end? If we can't get our cross-functioning teams to agree on something, who is the ultimate decision maker? Sometimes it's me, sometimes it's the mayor, but making sure everyone's clear on that. And then also using shared tools to support transparency across, or if I couldn't make a meeting or I skipped my email for the day, a shared folder is something that we've really been utilizing, whether it's SharePoint, Teams, or something else, and kind of having those decision logs. Here's the decision or topic that was made. Here's who and what the final decision was and why decisions were made. That way people have kind of that history to understand how did we get to where we are, because so many things are going on, whether it's a CIP project or a new software that we're installing. So really that constant communication that Kevin mentioned, making sure that we're doing it, but in multiple ways, so people are actually hearing and pulling together those cross-functional perspectives.
Thank you. That's communication and data are very important, and maintaining visibility into that through communication, you can't overstate that. And so, Scott, along those lines, what does visibility across the capital life cycle mean to you? And are there technological tools that can help improve that communication?
Yes, Mike, absolutely. I agree with Elizabeth. It's great to be able to pick up the phone or have an email that everybody jumps on board with to keep moving in the same direction, but that doesn't always happen. So I'd encourage our audience members to think about the organization they work within or work with most closely today, and how many handoffs occur during the life cycle of a program or a project. Sometimes that answer is one, and you have a single project manager on from the planning phase into design into procurement for construction, into construction, and all the way through into closeout. More often than not, it's more than one. And what are you doing to help ensure that you minimize disruption from handoff to handoff to handoff? Communication is probably the best way to do that, but technology can help quite a bit, as can standardization in tools and terminology, and the way that you build, scope, schedule, and budget for a particular project or program. The more uniformity you have within your organization, whether it's small or large, the better chance you have of making a clean handoff from one phase to another in a program or a project. So it's not to say that there's a right answer on life cycle. I've worked for organizations that have gone in one direction from total project leadership from beginning to end into breaking out the individual phases to special subject matter experts, and I've seen it go in the other direction as well. It's not to say one is right or one is wrong, but think about how you can leverage technology, whatever that technology looks like, to ensure you've got standardization in your program and project management, in order to ensure that the communication that's occurring between the different disciplines or the different folks that are stakeholders or leaders of the projects and programs are seamlessly handing off a project, so that there's no disruption to the project from a standpoint of controlling the critical path.
Thanks, Scott. And you bring up a real life type issue here. I mean, there's a lot of experience on this panel, and we all know for a fact that projects, the plans don't always go according to plan. So when your projects get turbulent, not if, how can real-time data and collaboration tools help the leadership responsible for those projects respond quickly? And this is for everybody. So we'll start with you, Scott, since you were just on that.
Yeah, I'll follow up, quickly, and then defer to others. But I think technology is great. I think what we have to be careful of is that we don't use it as a substitute for communication. We don't use it as a substitute for decision making, but rather as a supplement to communication and decision making. You can get folks to embrace technology as a tool, but you don't want them to think that it's taking over for them in the way that they go about communicating challenges that they're having on their projects. And I have found, often when you roll out a new technology system, if you do it as a large group, folks will tend to think, well, as long as someone else has that covered, I'll just kind of fall in line. I think you got to individualize communication, and you also have to individualize technology. It's not always a one size fits all, and you have to determine, who's going to embrace it on day one, who's going to be a reluctant follower, and you might have to find a different approach for managing that in order to provide, the best across the board decision making that you can for your entire program team.
Got it. And Elizabeth, from your perspective, how does data and collaboration work together when those projects hit a little bit of a snag?
Well, and I think one of it is not just taking data at face value, because data tells us one thing, but maybe why, making sure we're having the conversations of why is the data showing that. We have the conversations all the time about, do we put stop signs or something at a certain location? And we've got one group saying, well, there's no pedestrians there. Well, as we talk through, we find out that no pedestrians are there because they feel like it's a dangerous intersection to cross. So understanding the data behind it and having that conversation and asking the whys and how, how does this work, and not just taking the data at face value and going with it and substitute, like was just mentioned, substituting it for experience and some of that, the personal side of things. So really being careful as we're using the data to help make decisions, but not rely on it solely.
That makes total sense. Don't focus on one thing, but look at many factors. So Kevin, your reaction?
Well, Scott, Elizabeth touched on it. I guess from my perspective, in my career, we saw technology advancing rapidly, and as a program manager, my job was to at least have a rudimentary understanding of the capabilities of the technology and how that would best fit into our program. And along with that, we talked about accountability and so forth, but as a program manager, it creates opportunities to streamline your program, and you have to be able to recognize that the opportunities for reorganization. An example that always pops into my head is just the rapidly advancing survey technology over the span of my career, and how it affected our program across the board in terms of staffing and equipment and how you would allocate that staffing. So I think as a program manager, you need to recognize the capabilities. You don't have to be a subject matter expert, of course, but and then how to efficiently integrate that technology into your program.
Very good. Appreciate those thoughts. Now let's talk a little bit next about our next theme, which is career pathways and professional growth. I mean, you've all had very successful careers in delivering infrastructure over many years, and it would be great to draw some of that experience out. And with this, why don't we start with Elizabeth? Now, Elizabeth, how in this day and age do you retain staff as digital tools become part of everyday work? And do you see a need to upskill some of your existing workforce in this world?
Definitely a need to upskill. We just celebrated years of service today, and I had a gentleman who's been with us for 40 years, and we're implementing new technology, and he was contemplating retirement because he's like, I don't know if I want to learn this new system. And so really finding ways to invest in training that's relevant and not just one time, that it's an ongoing, trying to make the transitions into technology easier for the existing employees who have been with us, thankfully, for decades, but also finding ways there's technology, whether it's our snow plows that are out. You sit in one of our new snow plows and it's like a video game, and using that to get some of the younger generation interested in driving snow plows because they are home playing video games. It looks very similar to that, and trying to draw their interests. So we've been investing in a lot of training. We've also been working on really empowering internal champions of certain systems through kind of a train the trainer type situation. So instead of going out professionally, we will work with the power users in our area and have them do a training, tips and tricks on how to do things easier. And it could be on something as simple as Excel, or it could be something, a new software that we're implementing. But then also linking all of that to career growth and how this can support them in this current position, or maybe they want to transition to a different role within the department, and really trying to show people how that tech fluency supports advancement and can eliminate stress, and how can we make kind of that work smarter, not harder type efforts, and trying to really focus on how it benefits them directly and getting them skilled in ways they might not. So they don't have to come to a class and learn it. Are there different ways we can bring the training to them? A lot of hands-on training, those types of things. We have found it has been really beneficial the last couple of years for us.
Thank you. And Elizabeth mentioned a few things that kind of stand out here regarding people that maybe want to continuously learn, that want to upskill. So Scott, I mean, how can leadership in an organization like the ones you all managed, how can they foster a culture of continuous learning around data and technology and technique?
Yeah, Michael, I think, and I like what Elizabeth talked about of having internal champions. I think as leaders, we sometimes make the mistake of just rolling out a new piece of technology and assume that everyone is going to gravitate toward it and adapt it. We might go through a very rigorous process of gathering requirements from those folks, and then user testing brings certain people in, and we get a thumbs up and a nod of the head that this all looks good. And then you go live, you flip the switch, and you've got a few core super users, and the other folks start quickly finding ways to shoot holes in the new rollout. And I think that's more likely to happen with folks that are change resistors than those that are quick to adapt. I think as leaders, we have to realize you can't just roll it out there and hope that everybody picks it up and uses it equally. You've got to individualize technology, if you will. It's not necessarily, there's a temptation to just say, oh, it's going to work for everyone. We've gone through the rigor of proving it out and configuring it to meet our needs. But if you hop on a call with 25 people and you're the leader of that call and you're kind of walking them through how the system's going to work, and they're not actually pushing the buttons in the system themselves and asking questions as you walk through the process, and then you're not giving different individuals different assignments related to that technology and hopefully aligned with what they want to do for a career. Elizabeth touched on it. We've got 4 generations in the workforce, and they're not all going to receive innovation in the same way. They'll all be open to it by virtue of the fact that they see if it aligns to the vision of the company, how it's going to improve workflow, how it's going to hopefully make lives easier, how it's hopefully going to inform better decision making. But the way that they go about adapting to it is not going to be the same from one person to another. So I think it's really important to think about, as a leader, how you're going to individualize technology and not assume that a group of 5 or 500 that report to you are going to treat it all the same.
Thank you. And Kevin, for you, I mean, you've led small teams all the way up to large organizations. So during your time, how have you seen that technology has required a change in the skill sets needed for capital program leaders?
Well, and I would definitely echo what Elizabeth and Scott said about, the challenge is, and Scott mentioned that you've got 4 generations in the workforce, and so there is a challenge with the more seasoned folks with a lot of this new technology. A lot of them, they can struggle with it. Elizabeth touched on what I've seen in my career is developing the internal power user to hopefully advance that technology throughout, your organization. And so I think the bottom line is as far as workforce retention and recruitment, in my experience, we've had to be really flexible because in my case, a lot of DOTs, at least when I was there, we had some antiquated, I guess, career advancement policies. And as the technology advances, you have to be able to recognize that you're going to need to develop different ways to recruit and retain people based on the advancement of technology. And it's just a different way of doing things. Another thing that we recognized is being able to have those subject matter experts and provide a career path for them that they may not necessarily want to get into management. That's something we dealt with a lot in Montana. Is the technology experts would kind of hit a ceiling and they were done. So we had to develop and change our career advancement through the shifting technology.
Very good. I appreciate the comments, Kevin, and the rest of the panel on that particular theme. I'd like to move on next to leveraging technology and data to drive organizational performance. But first, it looks like we have a survey question. Is that right, Kelsey?
Yes, just a quick little poll question. We're asking how mature your organization's use of technology is. We just want to be able to really tailor our answers and knowing where you are in the life cycle and the development of technology. So if you're very advanced, fully integrated systems and dashboards, a little bit more on the moderate or early side, or not using technology or very minimal use of technology. As all of our panels mentioned, the integration of technology can sometimes be a very interesting concept and needs to be adopted properly. And so this knowing where we're at kind of helps us with these next responses. Give it just a few more seconds. And then as just a quick reminder, our Q&A chat box is open. I see your questions coming in, and we will reserve some time towards the end to answer all of those. All right, so looks like we're pretty moderate. Some technology, but not consistent, which is very great to know. And it looks like no one's in the very minimal use yet, so that's perfect. All right, and then Mike, I will hand it back over to you.
Thanks, Kelsey. So let's talk about the data that the technology uses, right? And you can see on this slide that 82% of enterprises report that data silos disrupt their critical workflows pretty regularly. So, Scott, I have a question for you. How could data transparency reshape decision-making, particularly if you could break it out of those silos?
Yeah, Michael, I like the top box there. Use data analytics to inform decision-making, not necessarily to drive decision-making. We like to talk about data-driven decisions a lot, and I prefer to use the term data-informed decisions because there's a number of variables that you just have difficulty quantifying and putting into a spreadsheet in order to help pick one project over another. I also like the 82% disruption of workflow, and I touched on that a little bit when I talked about minimizing disruption as you hand off from one project manager to another or one phase to another within a particular program. Transparency sounds like a great word. Who here wouldn't want transparency? We all love transparency. It's let's face it, it's a little bit of a double-edged sword. The data that you track as an agency tells a story, whether you like it or not. And if you allow someone to write their own story off of your data, yes, that's being transparent, but you might not be contextualizing the data that you're presenting in a way that gets to the decision that you want, or maybe doesn't even ask the right question. They think that you're asking a question other than what the data is showing. So I think we have to realize that just putting out data for the sake of saying that you're transparent, having a dashboard for the sake of having a dashboard, doesn't always draw the outcomes that you want. And I'm not suggesting for a minute that you change the data. I'm saying that you contextualize the data and you realize that the numbers alone are going to tell a story, and it's up to you as a leader or owner of that information and data to make sure you contextualize the data to help them draw the right conclusions as an audience member. Some people are not nearly as informed as you think they are about the data that you're putting in front of them, and you have to be able to make sure it's something that's easily understood and represented within the framework of the organization that you're trying to lead.
Thank you. Now, we've all spoken a little bit about the procurement of technological tools to aid in the work of delivering a capital program throughout this webinar so far. But Elizabeth, when you set out to use a tool or procure a tool like this to help deliver capital programs, how do you assess whether that new technology is really adding value?
I start at the very beginning and really define the success matrix and the goals up front. Like, what problem are we solving and for whom? And really understand that, because then as you work through and you're whiteboarding out this workflow or this new software, you can look at, okay, is this at every stage, is this solving the problem that we're asking? Does it, for us, it could be saving time. We recently were doing a kind of a training travel tracking form, seems very administrative and little, but we're trying to figure out how to save time for our administrative assistants. How do we reduce the errors, and how do we produce the reports that our city council wants on how much are we investing in training and travel? And really evaluating that throughout the workflow and asking critical questions. Okay, who's benefiting from this, but who's absorbing any extra work? Because it might save time over here, but we always know there's someone else that's probably picking up a little bit more different work. Is it scalable? Is this something we can do just in one area or across the entire department? And the other question is really, do we already have a system that does this? There's so many systems that we have that we use 1/10 of their capabilities. So do we really need a new system, or can we just better utilize something we already have? And doing that, we were recently working on that training travel, and we were going to put it into what we put our contracts into. And ultimately, we ended up just using Microsoft Forms. We didn't need to create something super flashy, but because we really sat down and thought through the process and what problem we were trying to solve, it allowed us at the end to say, okay, was this successful? Yes, it solved this problem, it found efficiencies, and the system is now, or the process is easier. So asking those questions every step of the process really will help you ensure whether that technology, that workflow was really adding value at the end.
Great, thank you. Kevin, for you, I have a question. You've used the word accountability several times in your comments, and that's not a bad word, right? But can you share an example of technology helping improve collaboration on your teams or improving accountability?
Well, and we've kind of touched on some of this stuff. The easy answer is, we integrated a software program for how we document and administer projects in the field. That's a good example. Microsoft Teams is a good example, but I guess I wanted to go back to the silos, and Scott and Elizabeth hit on this pretty well. And my experience at Montana DOT in terms of siloed data collection and so forth is as technology advanced, throughout my career, and we saw new opportunities to to streamline things, you would discover that there would be several areas within the department, different sections, different bureaus and so forth, that were actually collecting the same data differently. But in the end, it was kind of duplication of effort. And so, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but my mission as COO was to break down those silos and eliminate those the duplication of effort with the data. And in a lot of cases, the advancing technology would help us do that. So hopefully that answers your question.
It does. I appreciate it, Kevin. But, for the rest of the group then, before we move on, what's the biggest barrier you think to using that data or the tool effectively? Is it the tool itself, or is it the culture of the organization or the mindset of people?
All of it.
Kevin, I'll ask you since you're still on.
Sorry, Mike. And that, so could you repeat? It was a kind of a two-part question.
Sure. I mean, what's the biggest barrier to using the data effectively? Is it the tools, the mindset, or the culture, do you think?
Well, my experience was, again, kind of the mindset and the culture. And Scott touched on how you can interpret data. It's a slippery slope. In a lot of cases, you can make it say what you want it to say. And so I do think definitely my experience, culture, I think, was a big thing to have to break through. This is our data. This is how we collect it, and this is how we use it. And I had to gently remind some of my divisions that, no, this is not your data. It belongs to the taxpayer. And so I would say, for me, my experience, it was cultural.
Very good. Anybody have a different take on this before we move on?
Michael, I think there's definitely a mindset aspect to it. Folks like Kevin and me have been at this for a while, and I think we probably go into a lot of situations believing our experience is going to drive us to make the right decision more than some new data set that wasn't available to us previously. I mean, I think of all the different analyses that we ran at Colorado DOT around concrete versus asphalt on a resurfacing or reconstruction project. I led a project once where we took the windshield data from our maintenance crews on the condition of our surface treatment, and then we took, the engineering data using LiDAR and other more sophisticated techniques on the actual, on the engineering condition of that very same pavement. And we ran an analysis comparing the two to see how much correlation we had between windshield observation and engineering and technology analytics. And it wasn't, not surprising to anyone, but it wasn't maybe necessarily a perfect correlation as we might have hoped. And it wasn't necessarily either that the technology was given a more accurate depiction of the surface treatment than some of our maintenance crews who had to go out into the field on a regular basis to actually chip seal and maintain that roadway for the public. So I think what we have to do, this is kind of the flip side of having data contextualized, so it tells the narrative that you want people to interpret. You have to be equally careful of not going in to an analytics opportunity with a foregone conclusion.
Exactly. Elizabeth, anything from your perspective?
Yeah, there's definitely a culture and mindset to it, but I would say here at Lincoln Transportation Utilities, we were data rich, but kind of information poor. We had so much data, it wasn't really in a great usable format that we really trusted it. So I created a team. I think they cringe when I call it a team because it's 1.5 people, but of data that they could really, as just data insights and analytics. Here's all this data. Can you really compile it and put it in a way that we can understand it and ask questions and figure out what we can do with this? And that has helped tremendously. And as we start having those conversations, that mindset and culture has now changed, where they're like, ooh, I have a bunch of data. Can you guys put this? They're very neutral. They don't understand. They're not the subject matter experts. So they just pull the data and kind of say, here's some trends. Here's some things that we're looking at. Here's a gap that we're seeing. And it provides that neutral perspective. And they're just using tools like Excel and our existing tools. It wasn't anything new, but having that new perspective and a new way to look at it and just new questions to ask, that has really helped us and the team remove those barriers, that reluctance, or just that overwhelming feeling of, I've got data, but I have no idea how to use it. That's been helpful for us.
And that's a good segue into our fourth theme. With the audience expressed quite a bit of interest, which is building the right org structure for long-term impact. And Elizabeth, you were on a roll there, so let's keep with you. How do you design an organization that can scale with population growth and technological change?
I've really focused on trying to automate the routine tasks. That way, the team can really just stay focused on high value work, not get down into the details of, administrative processes, tracking things, those types of things. And the other thing that I've learned is really choosing platforms, softwares that integrate well, so we can reduce duplication. We can have that information sharing even between our software systems. And then we've also really looked at software where we are able to avoid what I call vendor lock-in, where only we need the vendor to come in and make these changes, or we need the vendor to come in and pull this data. Wanting systems where staff can actually look at that data, manipulate it, run reports, and do different things with them. That way we're leveraging that data, and we're trying to partner with like our state DOTs or our county partners on data systems where we can get a bigger picture, not just what is immediately within the city limits, but thinking and being able to plan longer term, looking out 3-5 miles outside the city limits, and working on softwares and processes that also overlap into the county and the state. And that's really helped us lean on each other and get additional resources without necessarily having to add a lot of FTEs, adding additional costs for outsourcing, those types of things.
That's good. And so I'm glad I came back to you, because I finished some of your previous thoughts, and I appreciate you following up. But Scott, how can agencies integrate program management systems into governance and use people and their time more effectively for transparency?
Yeah, Michael, I think there's a lot to unpack in the governance question within the framework of capital planning and programming. When I think about governance, I think about chartering a new organization or a task force that's assigned a specific assignment with a definite duration. You talk about a RACI matrix where you define roles and responsibilities of the different quote unquote silos within the organization. You talk about having one common work breakdown structure that can feed not only scheduling, but cost estimating and other activities across projects of all different shapes and forms for a given organization. You can leverage technology to start help you building these tools and not expect your project managers and others to reinvent the wheel every time they have a new project, but to really pick up from a higher level of understanding every time they embark on a new program or project, by providing them with some of the basic fundamentals of capital program management, and doing that in the form of technology to make it as easy as you can for them to turn on and be up and running on that first day, rather than having to go and build out a new schedule of activities for a project, which is very similar to 20 other projects that their peers have completed over in recent years, but maybe is brand new for that particular project manager. So when you talk about some of the basic principles, it doesn't matter what the specific technology is designed to do. but just starting with a good core understanding of the Gantt chart, of the roles and responsibilities in the form of a RACI matrix, of how you go about preparing a cost estimate. Some of those fundamental things on program and project management can be built into the tools to ensure that everybody starts at a level platform and they're playing kind of on a higher field.
Perfect. And Kevin, I'm going to ask you the last question before we get to audience questions, which I'm sure we'll have a few. And I had one in mind, but really I want to pick on your experience, Kevin. What advice would you give a capital program leader starting their career, looking at needing to digitalize their workflows and their entire program?
Well, I'm not sure I understand the question completely, Mike. I guess, and Scott and Elizabeth touched on some excellent points there about integrating technology and so forth, and the best structures that will support that, organizational structures. What I will say is my experience, again, with the state DOT, as technology advances, you look for opportunities to shift your organizational structure to better accommodate efficiency and so forth. And I guess I'm a little bit of a dinosaur in terms of what I would add to that is, my opinion is organizational structures will change and morph throughout your career. What I think is really important is as a upper level executive management is to develop a healthy culture within your organization. And that takes a lot of work and a lot of communication, a lot of teamwork. But I do feel that the culture of an organization permeates from the top. I was going to I can use an analogy, a football analogy, but I don't want to offend anybody out there. But if you look at a couple of different football teams, I'll use the New York Jets as an example. They've been floundering for 50 years. They haven't done anything. And then you have other organizations like the Pittsburgh Steelers have had 3 coaches in 40 years. The Green Bay Packers have had 3 quarterbacks in 30 years. It's a culture and it comes from the top. And so all this technology, it can certainly aid you and make your organization more efficient, and you can find opportunities to actually reduce staff and be more efficient. But I can't stress for folks out there that are moving up the ladder that the importance of building a strong team and developing a healthy, productive culture in an organization that demands accountability, but also fosters innovation.
And you did pretty well answering that question. Who doesn't like a good football analogy?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it is all about leading teams, and you gave some great examples of that. And so I'll ask the others, Elizabeth and Scott, for their reaction, but I think that's a great way to end that part of the discussion. It's all about building a winning team that delivers projects. So Elizabeth, any reaction?
What advice would I give to a new capital going to digital? I would say probably the biggest thing would be don't replicate the paper process. Don't just copy and paste. Really ask and go through your workflow of why do we do it this way? How could we change it? Who needs to be in there? Because that was probably the biggest lesson I've learned is just when you copy and paste the paper flow, it never goes well.
Absolutely right. And Scott, do you agree, or do you have a different viewpoint or something to add?
I totally agree. I think every capital program I've been involved in has been one part technology, one part process, to Elizabeth's point, and then to Kevin's point, one part people. and you need to know what that balance is between the three. I'm going to run with Kevin's analogy, having just driven back from Green Bay, Wisconsin through Elizabeth City of Lincoln, Nebraska to get to Denver from the Thanksgiving holiday last week. It's offense, defense, and special teams. And if you don't have all three parts working in synchronization, it's hard to expect a win at the end of the day. And I think if you're the general manager or the head coach of all three, you got to look and see, where are you strong and where do you need to put some of your attention? And the answer is not always where you think it's going to be. You might need to spend a little bit more time on the human element in order to get the process and the technology working the way that you want it to. So my piece of advice would be, make sure you understand that balance, and put focus where you need the focus in order to get the results that you want between process, technology, and people.
That's perfect, and a great way to wrap it up. Speaking of people, we do have some people that attended this webinar and might have some questions. So Kelsey, I'll stop here and ask you if there are any questions that need to be asked and answered by our panel.
Perfect. Yeah, we did have a bunch come in, and I'm actually going to combine a few just so that we can kind of round robin it. There was an overwhelming majority of the questions were regarding how to keep the team morale up with multiple generations while implementing new technology. So I think everyone kind of touched on within these industries, having multiple generations span across the departments. How do you keep them engaged and committed and aligned with the goals when implementing new technology? Elizabeth, we can start with you if you'd like to go first.
Absolutely. It's really looking, it's not a simple cookie cutter approach. So you are going to have to come up with 3 or 4 different ways. And, you know, with the going back to the snowplow analogy, we really looked at, okay, for the younger, we're going to treat it the hands-on, kind of more of a gamer. My gentleman who's been with us 40 years and is like, I'm tired of learning. I don't know if I want to do this continuously. It's kind of a focus on the benefits to them and how can we make his job and his life easier and more enjoyable. And so it really is having multiple messages and really thinking of it from that end user's perspective and how are we going to make their lives easier. And each one's going to be a little different, but really taking the time to think that through and then develop approach that way.
Yeah, I think that's a great response in keeping that human element alive with any new kind of integration. Scott, do you have any thoughts regarding how to keep the morale alive?
I do. It's more than a thought, Kelsey. It's a plea. It's a cry for help. It's seldom these days I talk to an organization and they say we're adequately staffed or we're overstaffed. We've got folks looking for things to do. Usually most organizations I'm talking to these days are understaffed, and it's a little bit of reflection of just the demographics. That 4th generation, the baby boomers, are mostly retired right now, and they were a big part of the workforce for a long, long time. And there's just fewer folks to get even more capital work done these days. My ask of you would be, don't think you're going to undertake a major technology implementation and hand it off to someone, other duties as assigned. To do that to your own team, to tell them hey, we're going to make ourselves more efficient, but I need you to be more efficient than everyone else by maintaining your current workload and taking on this new implementation as an add-on. It's doing a disservice to that employee. It's doing a disservice to the implementation of the technology that you're trying to make effective. And in the end, it's doing a disservice to your organization by not committing to it with the resources that it demands. So that's my ask of the group.
No, I think that's a great response and a great thing to think about of, when implementing new things, it is sometimes an entire new team you're bringing on to make sure that process works. Kevin, do you have any thoughts or how you have seen like a shift within your organizations and the development of technology?
Well, I do. I would just like to echo what Elizabeth and Scott said. Those were some excellent points. It's a really difficult question, and I think it's definitely one of the biggest challenges of being a program manager, having cross-generational staff and new technology and so forth coming in and trying to keep morale up. It's very important to as a manager, that's kind of one of your main jobs. One of the things I would add that I did, my team did as I advanced through my career, is when we would get folks that were nearing retirement, maybe not getting all the way there, but kind of losing interest and maybe not wanting to partake in some of this new technology, we did develop a mentoring program for those folks that would kind of give them a little bit of a new lease on their careers, doing something different and developing actually in their area kind of a mentoring program for the new folks coming in. And of course, maybe it wouldn't be heavy on the technology end, but heavy on their experience and just helping the younger folks coming into the organization. And that did seem to have a pretty positive impact on morale. So that was something that worked pretty well for us.
Yeah, I think showing the value in, the generations who have been through the entire workforce and kind of relaying that to the younger generation, I think is so important, because there are some things you just can't teach from, a workbook. You need the real life experience. So I think that that's an amazing opportunity. And with that does conclude today's webinar. I did want to thank everyone for joining our webinar today, and thank you for our incredible panel of speakers for sharing your time and expertise. We hope this session sparked ideas and answered questions and maybe even raised a few new ones on different structures and implementations. We encourage you to continue this conversation with your organizations and network. And just a reminder, today's recording will be shared after today's session. But I thank you all for being here and look forward to seeing you in the new year.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Thank you, Kelsey.
Thank you.